our new animation, official new bumper. That's pretty cool.
Shiny.
Well, happy Monday and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of our friends around the world. We're here today with a special edition of the .NET Doc Show with our great friend, Maíra. Maíra, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Maíra Wenzel. I'm a PM on the .NET team. I'm responsible for the .NET website, and so .net or .net.microsoft.com. But it's been my role for the last 6 months, and before that, I was on the docs team like you guys, and so yeah, and I've been at Microsoft. I started back in 2006. I started as a writer in the ASP.NET team, so it's been a while. And before that, I was working as a consultant and as a software developer back in Brazil, where I was born and raised. And this is kind of like a very short version of my story.
So let me jump in there just because I know it's like a little known trivia piece that not many people know. Your name is actually not pronounced Maíra in Portuguese, is it?
No, it's not. Yeah, I go by Maíra just because it's so much easier and it makes my life super easy here in the US. But it's Maíra.
Maíra.
Yeah.
Hey, I said it correctly, I think.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. But
Maíra.
Yeah, but
Awesome.
but sometimes like that soft R is not easy for a lot of people to say, so I just go by Maíra. So you can choose Maíra or Maíra.
Awesome. And I mean, you said 2006, so that makes me think that's a long time you've been with Microsoft. So kudos to such an awesome career.
Yeah, I had a short break, like when we moved to Luxembourg in the middle, back in 2013, and so like remote work was not as accessible back then, and so I had to quit Microsoft and I stayed like as a stay-at-home mom for a while, and then I came back in 2015. So like on and off is like almost 12 years now.
Wow, that's awesome. Cool. So you said .net, and I'm assuming there's a lot of our friends who are with us today that are kind of curious, like what does that site all entail, and you know how you've been working on it for 6 months. How is it different from content development, right? What are some of the key differences?
We think of the .net as kind of our funnel for like beginners. So it's where you kind of start your journey if you're looking for information about .NET. It is also our acquisition site. It's like people that have to download .NET Core, .NET Framework, all like users and developers, like the SDKs, they have to go to that site. And also for people making decisions, like architects, that they will find like customer stories and so the information that ties them together. But then the deep dives, the tutorials, like where you're gonna learn more, then it's the docs, right? That's how I feel like that's the separation. So we are kind of like the entry point, and then we also try to tie in back and forth between the two sides. So like we work and pair well together to make sure that we get a good experience.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I know that we're for the hallway track, we've got a special thing that we're going to dive into. But before that, we should kick off our checkup as it relates to the idea of incrementally improving this website.
So Dave, do we have a fancy new animation for the checkup too?
We do, and the hallway track. Let's do it.
Okay.
So I believe I'm sharing my screen.
You are, but
press buttons. There we go.
Got Scott. There we go.
So today's checkup doc is a tutorial, actually, and this tutorial relates to our hallway track with Maíra, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to explore migrating an existing code base, the .NET website, with nullable reference types. So this tutorial is kind of something that we would like to try to follow. And our good friend Bill Wagner wrote this. And basically, C# 8 introduced nullable reference types. And when I first heard about nullable reference types being introduced, I was like scratching my head. I'm like, well, how does that make any sense? Because nullable, reference types can already be nullable. So what does that really mean? So the feature itself is an addition to how the IDE reasons about your code based on your intent. So with C# 8 nullable reference types, you can express that a nullable type, or a reference type rather, can be nullable, the same way that you would question like a value type. So let's take a look at this a little bit. So we've got some prerequisites. One thing to mention is that the C# 8 compiler is required. So you need to have Visual Studio 2019 version 16.3 and the minimal of the .NET Core 3.0 SDK. And from there, you just can literally go upgrade by enabling this nullable context within your projects. But you first have to specify that you're using C# 8. So there's a language version node within your CS proj, and you can specify that. And then you have to state that nullable is enabled. But then you can also do it with, nullable enable, like you got like these pre-compiler directives, and there's different ways to kind of do that, and there's different preferences. I have been kind of all in with it. So any net new project that I do, I always just do nullable enable, and actually the version you get for free. This is talking about upgrading, but if you're doing net new, any of your new projects are going to default to one of the latest versions of C#.
So, yeah. So that's how we enable it. What does, and you were explaining this to me last week, and to be honest, I'm still not crystal clear on it, so I could probably benefit from another explanation. What does this mean us?
Let me see here if they have any. Okay, so they're specifying default. So when we look at the string type, for example, assuming that this is in the context of nullable references being enabled with C# 8, the string type, since we're not saying it's questionable, right, adding the question mark at the end, we're saying that this is not going to be null. And the IDE will actually warn you and say, well, you have this property with a getter and a setter, and there's no definite assignment. So it's going to warn you that you're saying this thing cannot be null, but it's not definitely assigned to. So the IDE will kind of light up and give you different warnings and say, is that your explicit intent? So it's able to start reasoning about and providing more advanced flow analysis and things like that. So one of the things that you have to do is you actually have to specify an assignment. And since it's the first state for the title of this view model, you have to, you could either put it to string empty or default value, but here you're saying default, which in this case is null. So you're actually saying that this non-nullable thing is null, and that's why it wants you to do like the exclamation, like the bang, because that's called the damn it operator. It's basically saying, damn it, I know this thing's going to be not null eventually, but right now we're going to say it's null.
One last question on this feature for you, David. So the nullable checks, are those done at runtime or at compilation time?
This is, I believe, at compilation. That's a really good question. I'd have to look more into that. I believe it's just for prior to things being, ran. So when it's being compiled, when you have the code kind of sitting in the state where it's just the C# files, right?
And I kind of get the impression that like the most compelling use case is like development time feedback through the IDE.
Yeah, it's all based on warnings. Really, what this does is when you start enabling it with existing projects, you're going to end up with a bunch of warnings, because there's going to be places where you've ran into things where you haven't expressed your intent correctly, right? So if you enable nullable and then you go through and you start kind of annotating things with your intent, like this should be nullable, this can be null at times, so we need to express that. And then what the IDE will do is it will basically reason about that and start providing warnings and things like that.
We've got one question about this feature, and then we'll move on to the hallway track. And the question is, I tend to initialize strings with string.empty, so it's not null, but in fact empty. Is there a better way now?
Well, I guess I'm curious why you would do that. I mean, other than null. I mean, so that would just basically give you. So if you do it with string.empty, that's basically training wheels. What you're saying is then you can walk up to title in this situation, and title would safely be non-null. The thing is, things could specify or hard set it back to null later on. So I would say that if you start using nullable reference types and decorating it as being non-nullable, I mean, because that's really what you're saying when you're saying string.empty. So you would leave it as just a string proper without the question mark. And then the IDE, once you have nullable context turned on, will start helping you ensure that you have checks in the right places and stuff like that. So it's, I mean, I guess it's a matter of preference, but I would prefer to do it, relying on the IDE.
Sure. And with that, I think let's cut over to the hallway track and have a chat with Maíra.
Let's do it. So whose screen are we starting with? We're starting with yours, Dave?
Well, I don't know if we were going to jump into a screen or if we were just going to have some casual conversations about the site before we jump into it. I guess, what do you think, Maíra?
I think we should casually talk about the site and some of the things I've been learning about and some of the focus for the past few months, and then we can jump into code later.
Let's do it. Should we pull up the site at least? I can open that.
Yeah, I can do that, and then I can navigate here. Let me see.
I've got it open too already.
Okay. It's just that I want to show certain extensions that I'm not sure if you have.
Okay.
So,
yeah, go ahead and share your screen then.
Okay. And share screen. And I want this one. Okay.
Does anybody else just feel like, wow, it's Monday today? This is the worst case of the Mondays I've had in weeks, and I feel like it's because it's like the week after Labor Day or something.
I feel like it's Monday every day.
Well, I woke up earlier for you guys, so.
And in my case, I just don't ever know what day of the week it is. So
we're still in 2020, so just punt.
All right. So one thing, I know that you guys had a show on accessibility, but I want to touch base a few things that we've been working on the side and some of the tools that we've been using for the .NET website. I spent like the past month working on accessibility, and we have a team on developer division that goes through periodically testing accessibility throughout our products, not just the website. So so we take accessibility very seriously, and so like I wanted to dive into some of the extensions that we use. I think some of them are a little bit different than what Chris had shown in the show before. So one of them, which I really like, is the accessibility insights for web. And then
so what does this do here?
So it will do a fast pass, like and a quick check on some of the elements, see if you are missing some of the ARIA elements. So let me run it and show you. I don't think we'll have one issue here. Hopefully not. So we incorporated this tool as part of our checking process. Like when we're doing PRs, this tool I will always run as when I'm checking for any PRs on the site. And so it has automated checks. I think I can run this like I did on the show, just so we can on it. How is the show website?
Our show is .net docs.dev.
Okay. And so let's see here.
Oh, so you're going to throw our site under the bus.
Well, while Maíra's doing that, we have a request for links to the extensions that are being shared. Maíra, do you happen to have a link for that?
I actually just
extension?
posted it in the chat.
Awesome. Thank
Right.
you.
Thanks.
Oh, I think this one was not passing, so let me see.
So we're continuing with the theme from last week with John Skeet, where we just beat up our website. First it was the code, now it's accessibility.
Yeah, no, but I just wanted to show an easy example of like what it looks like. So it shows very like easily the automated checks, and so like this one is missing like an ARIA label of some sort.
Yes, okay.
So it should be an easy fix. And then this one has tab stops. This one I haven't used it properly, but the automated checks we incorporate as part of our PRs now. So like I will always run this. The other one that is the same. It's the same tool, but is the desktop version. And so let me close here. And let me.
So does the desktop version still work with browsers and websites, or does it?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
interesting.
let me. It didn't open. Let me
press buttons and hope for the best.
Yeah. And so this one will do a live inspect. So what is interesting about this one is when so what the automated check won't tell you is like if the labels are matching the description. And so here you can kind of see like exactly what the links are saying and if it matches. And so we had a couple of bugs that we had to fix where the text and the link and the button didn't they didn't match. And so like for someone that is maybe has some visual disabilities or something, they would have a hard time with it. And this tool also has color contrast, so you can kind of navigate and it will tell you like the contrast if it's passing or not. And so it will tell you here what's the ratio. So those are some of the tools that we use to test our products.
So I'm feeling like we had our friend
Chris Demars.
Chris Demars, thank you.
Yep.
I'm trying not to say his Twitter handle. Anyway, we had our friend Chris Demars on the show a couple of months ago, and we actually stepped through like an accessibility audit, and I'm feeling like that paid off actually when she did the automated test a minute ago. It ended up not being as painful as I thought it would be.
Yeah, well, I tried fixing a bunch of the things that we uncovered with Chris's show, but as code evolves, and I'm really interested in the fact that, like you said, you kind of tied this into your build system, and that's something that we should have done to avoid the evolution of code kind of falling out of sync from the one time that we ran it and fixed things, right? Like whack-a-mole. So it's interesting. Did you use Azure pipelines or GitHub Actions or some other thing?
I'm still looking for automated solutions. So if anybody knows, so it's just like part of the process, like mentally, like when I'm reviewing a PR, I will always run the extension now.
Okay.
Like, because we always so the team that does the website, it's me and one dev. So it's a very small team. And we review each other's work, and so like it's part of the process. And so for example, we just shipped like last month. I'll close here the windows. So we just shipped last month a change to the download page for .NET Core to clearly show like which versions are still supported and which ones aren't. And so as part of doing this page, like the first iterations, they will not pass the accessibility. Like if you navigated with the keyboard here, it wouldn't work. And now like you can use keyboard. I'm not using my mouse to navigate on the accordion. So it's just like this mindset of always having accessibility as part of your process. But I'm interested in finding out automated as well. So if anyone knows about any action or like pipeline or GitHub that we could use, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I just wanted to take a second to take a step back real quick, because you had just said that it's you and one other dev maintaining this beautifully put together and orchestrated website that has a ton of stuff in it and is actually fairly elaborate for how simple it might appear on the surface. So kudos for that. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and to talk a little bit about like the architecture, maybe we could go into that as well. And kind of like there's a lot of that we can talk about. So I want to make sure that we cover some of the things that people might be interested in.
So Maíra, I have a question, and you may or may not know the answer, but if we're going to talk about architecture, maybe we should take a step back from that and talk about what kind of traffic do you see to this website, say on a monthly basis? Are we talking hundreds of thousands of people visiting the website?
So we get 13 million page views per month, give or take.
Per month?
Yes.
You said 13 million per month.
Yes.
That's a couple. Yeah, that's
so it's a huge traffic, and a good chunk of that is downloads, maybe like 2 to 3 million downloads per month.
wow, that's awesome.
So do you have a sense of geographically what does that look like broken down? For example, is the majority of the traffic coming from the United States or Canada or India?
I did look into the stats a few months ago. I think it was like China, India, United States, UK. I can look it up and maybe post it later. But yeah, I think China was number one.
And and I guess this runs in Azure, right? How many?
Yes.
What like for like stat nerds and people who are really like into hardware? What kind of? Do you know what kind of what type of instances this runs on in Azure? I mean, and how many?
So it's an Azure App Service, but I don't know the number. I would have to go look into that. Oh, tough question, that one. I don't know.
Sorry.
No.
No worries.
Yeah, no, I was curious too. It's just one of those questions. No big deal. But you said so an app service.
Yeah.
And you do you have App Insights running? Is that how you're getting some of the telemetry about page views and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we also have Google Analytics running, so we get some of the insights from Google Analytics and some from the App Insights.
Cool.
So you use Google Analytics and App Insights in a complementary manner. They're not like exclusive of each other.
No, yeah, and I think like there are some data that I find in one and not the other, so I like the combination of the two.
It's interesting. So I, as an innocent bystander here, thinking about some of the peripherals of this project, I'm assuming that some of our guests are curious about, is this open source? If not, why not? And I know I poked that question a little bit before, so I know it's not. So we can state that right away.
Yeah.
And there's good reasons why it's not. But some people are probably curious, like, what's the underlying technology?
Yeah, and so we do have a few components. So let me open up maybe our I have like one slide share. Let me see if it will look like. Can you guys see it or no?
It's kind of small. Can you? That's better.
Okay. I don't think I will be able to present and share at the same time, or I'll have to figure out. But let me zoom in.
Well, and you can hide your ribbon too, your office ribbon.
How do I do that?
About
Here.
2. Yep, that's the one.
Okay, that helps. Okay, so this one, we have a couple of components and APIs. So we have some React Spot apps as well, but our main website is Razer Pages. It was it was ASP.NET MVC, like MVC, but then it was migrated before I joined to Razer Pages last year.
So awesome. So there's, let me recap that. So you were on MVC for a while and migrated over to Razer Pages.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's parts of it that actually have React, which is, JavaScript SPA framework. And I know that there was a tweet just recently from James, our friend James Montemagno, where he actually said that there's going to be Blazor introduced into this as well. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and so we're working on a new feature that we hope to ship soon, which you guys will also be included as part of that new page. But we're gonna have lots of shows. We're calling like .NET Live TV, and so we're gonna have like we really wanna showcase and give a chance for people to connect to the team and learn about technology on an easy way. And so like that page will be kind of the central point for that. And so I'm looking forward to it. So it's like a lot of the work that you guys done for the Docs Show website, we kind of like use that as an inspiration for the page as well.
That's awesome.
It's always that's the, and looking to Dave right there. That imitation is the highest form of flattery. So definitely, I think Dave deserves some recognition there.
For sure.
Thank you.
So Maíra, let me dig into something you said earlier. So you were talking about this migration from MVC to Razer Pages. Do you know why that migration occurred? Why the move from MVC to Razer Pages?
I don't know. I can ask around and see if some folks know, but like the team has been completely like refreshed since that happened. So I don't know if I'll find the people to answer that.
That actually that kind of raises an interesting point. How often do we lose, like, when teams have turnover, like web development teams and app development teams, there's this like arcane knowledge that gets lost. The history of the world as it was, that gets lost as you have turnover on teams, and then you end up, Maíra saying here, I don't know, this has both, So.
Yeah, no, and some folks were interested in hearing about outage storages as well. And then they were asking on Twitter, and I was like, oh, I haven't experienced any outage since I've started. But one of my coworkers saw the tweet, and then she sent me some of the stories that happened last year. So it's like, yeah, she had that knowledge, but without her on the team, then I wouldn't know. Like,
it kind of feels like dog fooding, right? Like if there's a new technology that we're putting out, like let's stand behind it by literally standing up a website that gets 13 million views a month and see how it does. Like that's, now there's going to be Blazor, and it's another, I saw some tweets out there from some of the friends around the world, and they're saying, is anyone doing Blazor in production? Is this a thing? And what apps are being built with that? And this is just another, I guess, testament to that.
Yeah.
So we have a question from our good friend Cecil. Cecil, thank you for tuning in. How many folks are on the engineering team for this website? I think you may have already answered this and said it's you and one other resource. Is that correct?
Officially, yes. But I also have been encouraging, since we are the .NET team, we have people that know how to code. I've been encouraging folks to help out. So if they want some changes, so I operate, and let me show, like, it's a private repo, but I operate it like it was an open source project, given my experience with docs. And so I have like milestones and labels and things like that. And so we file issues, we track milestones, and I encourage folks that are like wanting some changes to do them themselves, because since we are a small team, like the amount of work that we can do each month is kind of limited, and so like having their help really helps to speed up things.
It's interesting.
So Maíra, maybe a clarification there. So you said the GitHub repo is private, correct?
Yeah.
For those who are watching the stream right now, are they actually able to go out to this repo and open issues?
No. So if they have feedback for the site, usually we look at the feedback here on the side. So you can click here and can send comments to through Usabilla. But if you don't like that, you can go to .NET Core, and we look at issues there too.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. One other thing I wanted to mention, which I thought was super cool, is I noticed if you scroll down to the bottom of the .NET website, you actually see the runtime that's being used, the actual version.
Yes.
Down there in the footer, powered by .NET Core, I think it says 3.1.8.
Yes.
So this leads me to my next question. Are there plans to migrate this to .NET Core, or sorry, .NET 5 when that ships?
So we've been running let me see if I can get it to show the .NET 5 one. So we've been running since preview 1, 50% of the traffic on .NET 5 without any code changes. So, here, now I got it. So,
.NET 5, hooray.
yeah. So it automatically picks up the latest as soon as we ship. And so the next version will be RC1. So people and RC1 will have a go live license, and so people can start putting that code in production and have support. And so that should be happening soon.
And the RC1 bits are coming out today, aren't they? I saw some, I think locally, RC1 bits.
So
yeah. Everything goes right. Yeah.
So on running the preview bits for this site, and it's a pretty high traffic site. Have there been any weird issues that have popped up that this works on 3.1 and this over on .NET 5 this works completely differently, and we've had to talk to we've had to open issues or something like that?
So not right now. Like it has been completely smooth ride. Like no issues. We've seen better performance on the .NET 5 bits. So we have a dashboard that we compare. And we wanted to dive more into that, but we still haven't had time. But like it does run better. The performance without any changes, it runs faster on .NET 5. But we haven't experienced any issues so far. Like no code changes, nothing. I think for Blazor, now that we are going to be adding Blazor to the website, it will I think it will benefit from some of the features that are being added in .NET 5.
I'd be really curious to see like a side-by-side performance comparison on 13 million monthly page views of .NET 5 versus .NET Core 3.1.
Okay, see if I can find that link.
That'd be cool.
I'll take that request a step further and say that might make for an interesting blog post.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I was just thinking a tweet at a minimum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. That's really awesome. So I know that we should we switch over to like a live share? I know I've got some of the source code here. I know the repository is private, but we've got it opened up here in Visual Studio. And should we look at some of this stuff and kind of go through that a little bit? So we actually have the source code. This is all of it right here. We got it localized to my machine. And I'm going to minimize some of these things, but I actually have a live share. I see Scott's on there. I see Maíra's on there. And we've got this. Well, first of all, if we're going to follow the tutorial, the first thing that we're actually supposed to do is go in here and edit the CS proj and enable nullable, press buttons, enable.
Yeah, and because this is a 3.1 project, we don't have to specify the length version because it is C#8 by default, right?
Right. So we thought it'd be really interesting to look at an actual exception that occurred on the website. So there was this exception that was, one of our favorite exceptions, right? The $1 billion mistake, nullable reference exception, object reference not set to an instance of an object. And it actually was occurring on, as I understand it, the layout. So this layout is shared amongst many, many of these pages. And we have this shell service.load given the context request path. And so let's just see here. So now the first thing that I'll point out is the fact that this is now, well, why is that questionable? Let's go into it. Let's click buttons. So load returns a, it says site shell, and it doesn't say that it's questionable, but I think it somehow knows that. Create value or no default result. Oh,
So-
it's a task. Interesting.
So do you want to just compile to see like the amount of warnings that you will get now that you
Let's do it.
enable nullable?
Concurrent dictionaries, cached object. There's all these cool things. All right, restoring packages. Lost my camera. Lost my.
So while this is
I don't want to lose
Well-
you, David.
Oh no.
while this is doing the equivalent of an npm install, just kidding, it's just building. One thing I wanted to point out, something very subtle that David did earlier. He right-clicked the project in Solution Explorer and went to Edit Project File. Pro tip, many folks aren't aware, there's a shorter way to do that. You can just double-click the project name in Solution Explorer, and that will then open up the project file in an edit view.
Yeah, I remember it was like earlier this year, actually, or maybe late last year, when Kendra demoed that feature in one of the internal showcases that we have, and it was like a standing ovation.
That's awesome.
Yes, and that is a big deal because if you worked at all in the legacy framework days, you know the pain of having to unload the project first and then being able to go in and modify it.
That is a big help. Yeah, I'm just so used to doing right click edit, so that's good to know. I historically, when you would click on that, it would open up like the actual properties like GUI page, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we have some warnings. We compiled it here. We have 7 warnings, and they are non-nullable property, warnings. So it's basically just specifying that they're uninitialized. And this is what I was talking about before, right? When we look at the code here, so there's this site shell metadata mapping, and it looks like a very simple POCO. It's got 3 little properties hanging off of it that are both publicly get and set. So we've got a path pattern, cache key, and this metadata object. And notice that since we have nullables enabled, and we don't have any annotations for that, the IDE is going to look at this and say, well, these are actually uninitialized. We're specifying implicitly by just saying string here that this is non-nullable. So if we wanted to annotate that as nullable, we could say question mark. And then our flow analysis would change such that any place that's using this property, any of these 3 references, it would start looking at those and saying, is there a check to defend against that potentially being null, right? And our IDE kind of serves as training wheels and helps us out a bit. So let's just leave that as it is, and let's go back to the actual layout, because that's where we actually had a bug that we wanted to look at. So in here, we've got a shell service, and this is injected, and we call load given a context request path. And so this is, I think, where shell could be questionable, right? Because it's potentially returning as null. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, so let's minimize this real quick and see if we can figure out why that's happening. So mappings is a static read-only collection here, is not null here. So first, well, that's really interesting. So we're assuming Well, what's
So I'm wondering there, David,
Mhm.
should that be a call to first or default?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Should that be first or default? Because is there any way for us to guarantee that this path is going to be available? And so this says path string. But if we went back real quick, let's pin this. Over here, we're passing in the context and the request and then the path. So I don't know if these are always going to be not null or not, right? So context, I'm assuming the context is always going to be there, right?
Yeah, I don't think that there is a case where you would have a null in this.
Well, request, we're always in the context of a request, right? What about the path? Gets or sets the request path.
I mean, any request is going to have a path associated with it, right? I mean, it's got to go to some endpoint.
So we can assume that's always correct. So then this
Yeah. What I think is happening is that like when it like tries to get that information, it's still like not available. Like this is like we have to call the service to get like the footer and the header, which is like a Microsoft service.
Mhm.
And so in some cases, this is returning null. And so that's where the exception is happening. I tried to add one more call to see like maybe like after a second request, it will find like the like have a little bit more time and build, but still like it was not enough. So
So is it this line 64, that when it walks up to
Yeah.
shell and says CSS includes, this is where it would fail?
yeah, yes.
So is it possible? So this is null, not this?
The shell is null,
The shell is null. Okay.
and then you get the exception.
So, cache, getter add, duration. Could there be something going on with the asynchronous context? I mean, we're building the shell async, and then we're walking up to result. That kind of seems as though that might be a potential for, like one deadlocks. Synchronization context comes into play, but since we're .NET Core, it's not necessarily a concern. So what if this API was changed to be task returning, and we awaited rather than just saying .result?
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you're going to ever do .result, that's usually a code smell, but you would say usually get, if you have to absolutely do it, you do get a waiter, then you'd say .get result this way, because that's
I think
safer.
it's a great idea because we do need that to build the page. So I think it's a better fix.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, because we should be awaiting those things. Come on, wait for it to. Oh, we don't have it. We do have task. Okay. Whew. And then in here, so that's building. So this is a get or create. So that's in the context of, does this have an overload for task returning async? Is this how you would do that? And then this would be awaited here. Let me see. Or
I think there are too many awaits, no? I don't know.
let me see. Well, so we have to make our method, if it's going to be task returning, we have to say async to enable the await. And if we have all of these things here, our cached object, and then get or create value, and that returns our site shell, but it takes a function. So is this cached object, is that part of .NET Core, or is this part of some other custom thing?
Let me see there. Where is the implementation?
Click get or create value. There's a lock object or class. This is one of the models.
Yeah.
Okay. So it looks fairly custom. Threading, interlocked exchange. Whenever I see interlocked exchange, I panic. I'm like, oh my God, advanced code. So it's of T. So I don't know why that wouldn't work for us. I mean, because this is just a task here. So why can't we say, give us the task that represents that work?
Well, what was the build error that the IDE is throwing there? It looked like it was it might have been a casting error.
Yeah, it cannot implicitly convert type task site shell to is it because it's
Yeah, I
question?
can't convert a task of site shell to site shell.
Maybe one was questionable. Let me see. I think I can't re-gave up again. Bear with me. So we can probably just make
You
that
have a bear
questionable.
with you?
Bear with me. Come on. One.
So Cam, are you proposing that he remove the question mark in the method signature?
Here we go. I know what's going on. It needs to be a task. We're specifying it there. We're saying it's a cached object of a task of the site shell.
And probably should be non-nullable there, right? For the return. That's
Do we
what's got.
Do we not want it to be nullable?
Like we do need at least one, right?
Yeah. So is this not a valid object?
Well, wait. Hold on. So what you're returning though, I just realized what's going on here. So you're returning. Can you move your mouse so I can?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you. So the anonymous function there is returning a task of site shell, but you're awaiting it. I think you want to get rid of that awaiter, don't you?
Oh, yeah, we don't need the await. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I thought I was. I don't know.
All right,
Or maybe we should look into another part of the code.
no, let's do it. Let's do it. Come on, cache getter add object. If anyone in the chat here sees, if anyone watching is like, hey, you should do this, call it out in the chat. So we're getting or adding, and what we're trying to get or add. So it's looking for a function. So I think that's part of the problem. So the getter add is doing a function of string with a cached object of site shell. So it won't let us do this task of site shell. So this won't work down here. I think that's part of the problem because our cached object doesn't let us specify. It just lets us do like a single object. So there's like a limitation with this thing with our cache. So that's just a concurrent dictionary. Oh, here's what I found. I found the problem. All right, concurrent dictionary. This right here. This needs to be a task. And then this needs to be a task. But that's what we're putting in there. So then it should really be like a lazy cache. Or a lazy task. Ta-da.
So I think this is a great example of how every developer struggles.
Yeah.
This is just a day in the life of a developer.
So there you go. So now this is asynchronous. One thing I'd probably do is refactor this to say load async to make it make more sense of it. But then that brings up an interesting point. Does our CS HTML actually support? Oh, look at it. So glad you guys have so much difficulty with tasks in a way like that. Yes, we are mortals.
Does anybody else ever feel like Visual Studio is like a toddler and you're like throwing things at it? No, does this make you happy? What about this? How about this?
I mean, it was telling us, we were just all like in the moment. We're like, oh, we don't know what to do. And it's like, oh yeah, this cache object that is sitting up here.
And it's my first like real live session. Like I've used live session before, but not for coding. So I was like, it's great.
Why won't it let me refactor this? Like, does that not work? How do I do Control R? Rename. There we go. And make it async. You always want to have async.
So this is I'm curious, for those in the chat, what do you think about the async suffix on method names? This is likely to start a holy war.
And I think that's fine because we know we're right.
I'm just curious, what are folks' opinions on what David did there? So he renamed the method from load to load async. Adding the async suffix.
Yeah, share your opinions in chat. I'm curious. One thing I like to do, it's very intentional. The reason I do it is I like to be able to just read the method name. I prefer to use var where possible. So I don't want to have to say task of whatever the type is and be explicit with my declarations. and I like to know at a glance that I am, expecting something to be task-like in its return. So when I say async, that immediately tells me it can be a value task, a task, or a task of T, or any of the task-like things. It's just one of the ways I prefer to do it.
So you're not wrong, and I'm in total agreement with you. But there is a part of me, and hopefully somebody will back me up in the chat. There's a part of me that's like, okay, it's a strongly typed language. A function is going to return a task. It returns a task. It's right there in the method signature, right?
Yeah.
And why does it need to be in the the identifier? So.
Perfect. That's a good argument. I'll tell you why right now. So if I would have left this as load, we would have seen shell. Shell could have been potentially not awaited. And you would never have been the wiser. You'd have a bug in your code. You'd be like, well, what is going on, right? Later on, we have this shell thing. Oh, you actually have to hover over it now, and you have to see that it's still just a task, and it was never actually awaited. And because it wasn't awaited, oh my gosh, things don't work the way they're supposed to be. So I think when you say async, if the await keyword is omitted here, you're like, well, wait a second. Now this is a task. I have to make sure that I await shell later on.
So, and this is going to be another point of contention with people. To me, the answer there would be, and I'm not passionately devoted to this cause, so don't flame me in the chat. Okay, I see it Dave's way. I do it Dave's way, but I see the other side too. To me, it seems that var is part of the problem then.
Ooh. Ow, that hurts.
Words, Cam.
That's also a good one because, like, in theory, we only should be using var when the content, like if you go to like .NET Runtime repo and look at the coding guidelines, we should just be using var when the context is very obvious. So it's like you're creating an object of a certain type. So yeah, we should change a little bit of this code to use the explicit type.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. Like I was very much var all the things, and I think it becomes difficult once you are someone new coming into the code. It's a little bit less descriptive, but you have to make sure that, like, if you have a method that's returning a specific type, that it's very, very obvious, right? So mappings, we have no idea what mappings are. And we can assume that since it has this convenient method first, that there's some sort of predicate we're passing in, and this must be some sort of collection. But what kind of collection is it? And what is it a collection of, and how is it containing those things? So if we hover over it, we see it's a read-only collection, and it has all these site shell metadata mappings. So now the first thing that we're matching is one of those things. So it's like, I would have never have known it was that type unless you hovered over it. So yeah, I guess there's give and take, but I think the important takeaway is that you should try to help people who are coming into your code afterwards. And you should all try to agree, and as long as your team's happy doing it one way or the other, that's perfect.
Yeah, the important part is that intent, I think, is discoverable somehow, right? And everybody knows how the intent is discoverable.
Agreed. Consistency and discoverability. So we do have a suggestion in chat here: configure await false or configure await true. Are either of those needed in this situation?
So I think that they're not necessarily needed, and the reason is this is all going to happen on the server side, and the synchronization context actually doesn't exist to my knowledge in .NET Core. I don't think it's a thing anymore. It was a concern with like ASP.NET framework, classic stuff like that, .NET framework. But I could totally be wrong, and I don't think it hurts to add it. It's just knowing which context to kind of continue back on with. But diving back into this a little bit more real quick before we have to go.
See, we start well, and look, and I don't know. Don't look in the chat now, but we started. My fault. I'm sorry, but we've started the VAR discussion again. Just a quick, just to address that. Yes, that's acceptable. That right there, because I mean, it's right there on the same line. You're like, oh, that's a string.
Yeah. I agree. There's give and take. So one thing,
an issue for changing the vars.
Right.
on the site.
So one thing I wanted to call out real quick is we may have not fixed the problem. We made this simply a task, so now it's awaited rather than just doing .result. But I think some incremental improvements to this would be to add unit tests to kind of break apart each of these little helper functions. There's lots of points of failure for this, actually. So we've got a client factory that's being created. Is the client going to be not null here? Is the string that it's actually walking up to and getting this URL, is this XML going to be potentially null? When we do the convert XML to a model, is that part of the problem here? Is it parsing out incorrectly? Where is it failing? Right. Yeah. And I think if we have some unit tests to kind of stand up behind this and say, we can validate that if we give this a null XML string, is that the problem? Where's the problem? Right. There's lots of little helper functions here that we could dive into and kind of look to figure that out a little bit more.
And I got this morning, I got permissions to add the snapshot debugger to app insights. And so that's another thing that I'll be able to use to like see where this is exactly happening and walk back on the code. Because right now, like, it's very hard to debug this exception. It happens just to a few folks. And so like finding out like what's making that throw, then will be good.
Yeah, and I think that adding the nullable context here is now that you have nullable context enabled, is kind of going through and specifying like this is actually a struct, so that doesn't really matter, but at what points could certain reference types be null, and are they okay for them to actually be null? And then the flow analysis will start kicking in, and you can start kind of getting the help from the IDE to say, oh, we're not actually checking here. Right. I mean, we were checking up here at the top level, but where else down here and all these little helper, nested helper functions, is that a problem?
And do you want to just quickly switch to my desktop so I can show a few things before? So here we started looking into, so App Insights was one of the first things that I started to look into, like when I joined. So you can see like kind of our numbers in terms of number of failures and exceptions. And so like we really started to look into like 404s and things that were causing these. And so you can see like that we are like trying to reduce the amount of failures. And like we had like 2 million exceptions back in February, and now we're in the 2000.
Wow.
And so yeah, so like really trying to like improve the quality, and like right now it will also we define some like OKRs, which is like objectives and key results for the website itself. And so we have some objectives to improve like the performance and load time. And so looking into like Lighthouse and some of the things that can help us to speed up and be even faster, right? Because not everyone has a fast internet at home, right? And so we want to make the site even better.
That's awesome. That's so good to hear.
Speaking of making things better, real quick, we had touched on accessibility a lot throughout this show. One thing there wasn't conversation about was localization of content. Are there plans to do that with the official .NET site?
Yeah, so that's one of our objectives for this fiscal year. So it's like for like between end of year or next year is to enable localization. And we see that people use like some of the automatic translators because we get sometimes a screenshot with the feedback, and I see like, okay, we don't support this language on the site. So right now it's English only, but we are gonna be adding localization later on. So as I go through the process, I plan to also like write blog posts and things like that, and then we can talk about it and how we implemented this. So right now we're just on the planning phase for that.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear, and I'm certain the community is going to appreciate that. And continuing the theme of improving our show and the site and .NET holistically, one thing we failed to mention is Maria is actually going to be joining as a co-host for the .NET Doc Show, along with Cecil, who was in our chat recently. So we're super excited to have you as a co-host, and this is your first episode on as a guest, so you're going to be flipping roles. What shows can some of our guests expect to see you co-hosting here in the near future?
I think we'll talk about with Claire and the dotnet Foundation. I can't remember all that I've signed up. It was 4 shows that I signed up to co-host. I think maybe Julie. I'll see the list, but there are some awesome shows coming up. And I think to wrap it up, here is like what I was mentioning before, like the side-by-side comparison between like running on 3.1, which is the prod side, and the preview one with dotnet 5 with no code changes. You can see like the response time on dotnet 5 is faster. We have less HTTP server errors on dotnet 5 as well, and so and even less memory. So we need to dive more into this, but it's something that we're also looking to that. But it's kind of cool to see that even without doing any changes, just by using dotnet 5, the performance increased.
Yeah, that was at least a 5 to 10% bonus as the dashboard was updating. I was watching it between like 5 and 10. That was pretty impressive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This has been great. I know we're at our time box, so thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. I hope everyone enjoyed the show, and we'll see everyone next week, same time.
Thanks for having me.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, friends. That was awesome.